This video is about the real fat shaming issue that no one is talking about. So I've done a bunch of videos in the last year. You can go right back to, actually right on down to 9 months ago, about depression. Why am I depressed? Obese people tend to be more depressed because of the chronic inflammation. So obesity shows up a lot when it comes to the chronic diseases, and it has showed up a lot, obviously, when it has come to the whole COVID thing. So we now know that obese people are the primary COVID vectors, and they're the key spreaders. We know that if you're obese and young, you can end up with this awful outcome. It's horrible. So you can be thin, normal weight, but metabolically obese, and just as at risk as other obese flamers. So it's really important to understand obesity, which is very difficult to understand it these days because you've got people who screech fat shaming. Now, fat shaming is a specific, the definition is specifically humiliating someone specific. Specifically specific, right? It's about someone. It's not generally talking about health issues. So the people who screech fat shaming need to get their brains more organized because they live in a state of cognitive dissonance when you think about another issue related to obesity. So the same people who screech fat shaming are the ones who are going to be screeching for protecting the environment, which I'm all in favor of protecting the environment. But look at this. Obesity is associated with a 20% greater increase of greenhouse gas emissions compared to normal weight individuals. So you can't go screeching about fat shaming and while you're simultaneously screeching about climate change, because obesity is one of the biggest choices that humans can make to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. So you got to get over that, people who screech about fat shaming. What else do they need to understand, these people, which they clearly are not understanding? And that is the fact that 6 out of 10 adults in the U.S. have a chronic disease. It is very disingenuous to show all these skinny people over here, even though they made it as multicultural as possible to show the spectrum of Americans. What they forgot to show was that 75% are overweight and obese, which should have been clear. This was 10 people? Yeah. 7 of these people should have been 3 should have been overweight and 4 should have been obese. So they're not being genuine. They're being disingenuous the way they present chronic diseases here, what the CDC is currently doing. But they do tell us this. The risk for these diseases, poor nutrition, which means overeating crappy, high-calorie foods, pro-inflammatory foods, and not moving around. Those are the biggest issues. So those are the 2 biggest issues that causes obesity, and it is obesity that is the primary driver of all of these conditions. Obviously not smoking-induced lung issues. That would be smoking. You take away smoking, and you can take away smoke-induced lung diseases. All the rest of these diseases are promoted by obesity. Now think about this. 6 in 10 have a single chronic disease. What a sick nation we are. 40% of adults in the U.S. have 2 or more of these and other conditions that are considered chronic diseases. What drives all of this? Well, obesity does. So if you can get very loud screeching percentage of the population to screech about, screech at anyone who talks about obesity, who's that going to benefit? The people who are sick? No, it's going to benefit the drug and surgical people. Look at this. Curing patients, we know, is not. So is curing patients a sustainable business model? Of course we know the answer is no. And we're talking the business of drugs and surgery. So screechers out there, although they think they're helping the average person who is obese and suffering, they're actually not helping that person. They're actually helping the exploitive industry who wants those people obese, and they want more people to be obese. Nonetheless, you will find people in mainstream. Clearly, I'm not. If you found me, I'm just a lone internet guy. Here you have someone writing for the New York Times. Don't be ashamed of those extra pounds. What a moronic title. Even put this word in the title. You should be concerned of those extra pounds, it should say. Or you could be more, if you're old enough or you happen to see the movie Crazy People with Dudley Moore and Daryl Hannah, where you place an ad executive and decides to be honest. This is not honest. This would be more honest. Why your extra COVID-19 pounds can kill you. That would be more honest. So at least the New York Post was honest in this regard. So this is from the Times. Here's the Post. And again, the Post, this is back in April. Obesity, biggest risk factors for COVID-19 hospitalization. So how could this not be a massive issue that is discussed on all the news outlets and during all the different federal and state government announcements about COVID? Once you're locked down, get lean, get lean, get lean. Did you ever hear that? No, we never heard that. What else could have we been told in this New York Times article? Why your extra COVID-19 pounds make you a walking, talking coronavirus spreading machine. You know how that works? I went over this a bunch of times, but here's an image that I created that describes it. So I got all of these from, multiple articles, but most of these points, numbers 1 through 6, are in this article right here. And so what you can see, just real quick, obese people create more viral mutations with more virulence. They stay infected longer, so they're more contagious. You can read all 6. So we know that obesity is a disaster for COVID. So what is it about obesity that is so problematic across the board? Well, this is lean body fat with anti-inflammatory immune cells. You can see the fat cells swell, become yellow. They start to rot. They go through necrosis. And if you compare these immune cells on this side to those on this side, they are completely different. The ones on the right side in the obese body fat, they are pro-inflammatory immune cells, natural killer cells, and cytotoxic T cells. They show up for cancer and viral infections normally. But if you're obese, they're already there, which is why obese people, part of the reason why obese people are more at risk for cancer and viral infections. But in general, though, the obese body fat mass pumps out these pro-inflammatory chemicals that lead to chronic inflammation and all types of conditions. So, now if you're obese, and you know somebody who is obese, not everybody who is obese is this bad. There is a gradation, right? There are steps that you have to go through before you achieve, ultimately, this brutally inflamed level. So you can still be fat compared to being lean, still be overweight in terms of a BMI, but it doesn't mean that you're going to have this incredibly pro-inflammatory state in the body, which I'll show you how to look at the end of this video. So, you know that depression is a huge issue in America. Like 13, 14, 15% of Americans are depressed, maybe 20%, but it's like 30% are taking meds. It's brutal. So this is about a paper from 2010, Archives of General Psychiatry. Obesity was found to increase the risk of depression. In addition, depression was predictive for developing obesity. So if you're depressed and you become obese, that's just going to further feed your depression, which will now further feed your overeating to make you more obese, and now you're trapped in a cycle. Awful. So I just quickly, before I did this video, annual revenue of antidepressants. By 2023, it'll be $16 billion globally. Brutal. Down at the bottom from Time magazine in the US, 13% of Americans are taking antidepressants. So how many people are actually depressed? Well, these are people who have what they call major depression, maybe a little bit of minor. A lot of people run around with minor depression and they never even get diagnosed with it. So millions and millions of Americans suffer from depression. You can see as of 2017, it's a $210 billion a year industry in the United States, healthcare issues for depression. So what drives depression? Well, stressors, of course, in general, but obesity helps drive it. Let's not talk about obesity, because if you're less obese, exercising, you're much less likely to be depressed, and that would take revenue away from the pharmaceutical industry. Another huge industry that is benefited greatly by obesity is the infertility industry. In vitro fertilization is a mega billion-dollar industry now. It's ridiculous. And if you're an obese woman or man, you're much more likely to be infertile. If you're an obese woman, say 30, 35, and your husband is an obese guy, 45, 50, but still able to produce active sperm, and you end up getting pregnant with this 45, 50-year-old obese guy, 35-year-old obese woman, your child is much more likely to develop developmental diseases, physical health issues as well as mental health issues. But let's not talk about that, because if you do, you're a fat shamer. I mean, it's amazing that people actually buy into this nonsense. Here's an article from 2017, Maternal Obesity and Neurodevelopmental and Psychiatric Disorders in Offspring. Let's look at an image from this paper. Here it is, the image. So here is maternal obesity, and then so the baby is being bathed in inflammation for 9 months. The outcome is not absolutely going to be, but more likely for a child to develop autism or ADHD, otherwise general cognitive deficits. Child is just simply less intelligent. Do you want that for your kid? Worse, of course, would be cerebral palsy, and then these conditions down here, anxiety, depression, schizophrenia, eating disorders, and food addiction, all from an obese mother. Now, it doesn't guarantee it, but it increases the odds of it. So we should all be getting ourselves lean enough so as not to be compromised by an obesity body state of chronic inflammation. So this is what the cytokine storm looks like that I pictorially created, which kills people in the hospital when they get a really bad case of COVID or the flu. So this is a big storm of inflammation. This would be a little or just inflammatory state that gives us various conditions. So here is this little low-grade storm of inflammation, not the brutal cytokine explosion that causes death in the hospital within a week or two or a month of being infected. It's a low-grade storm of inflammation. Caused by what? Well, obesity is part of it. The average American gets almost 60% of their calories from sugar, flour, and refined oils, and we have these other problems down here. So it's not just obesity, obviously, it's many other issues. They're cumulative stressors, obesity being part of the stressor. And when we have this scenario, much more likely to develop a chronic disease. So there's a reason why everyone should be freely speaking about obesity and body fat excess, because it is the key outcome of an unhealthy lifestyle that then leads to the creation of all of these chronic diseases that allows for this massive healthcare budget to exist, or this massive healthcare expenditure to exist. So it's very simple, going the other way. But you have enemies that want you fat. The people who don't even know, the fat shaming screechers unknowingly promote this by not being intellectually honest about the obesity problem. And this, of course, allows for great revenues going to the pharmaceutical manufacturers that must exist to combat these lifestyle-induced diseases that people do not address with lifestyle. So it's very straightforward. So how should we look at this in terms of being rational about looking at dealing with body fat so as not to get trapped in the moronic fat-shaming vortex of stupidity? So this image came from my first book I published in 2016. And this is, in this chapter, you have, this image shows 4 basically layers. The outer layer are the diseases. Layer 3 are the markers that we have for chronic inflammation that you can measure clinically. Below that level are the biochemical changes. Now, the only chemistry factor that's typically measured in number 2 would be C-reactive protein. So it's not only a marker of inflammation that rises, it's also a measurable marker that's really cheap. So we flame up with our lifestyle. The flame is adequate enough to create these, to cause these markers to manifest clinically. And once they do, then any one of these or any one or more of these diseases can manifest. So what you want to do is not use all your attention to focus on the name of your condition. Let's go, where's depression? Should be here someplace. The name of your condition. Is depression not there? Here you go, depression. Osteoporosis and depression, I just happened to underline. Because there are medications for each. And I'm not opposed to them. Long term, yeah, a bit of a problem. You want to get your body healthy so that you pull back the flame so that these conditions go away. So this is not, when someone like me talks about getting rid of body fat, I'm not saying you got to get six-pack abs like the Power 90X stuff or the Insanity videos or whatever else there is out there. I'm talking about getting your body fat down to normal and your muscles working properly so that all of these markers of inflammation in number 3 go bye-bye. You can still be overweight and have them go bye-bye. And in that case, typically all these conditions here, if they're not too far gone, will improve or significantly improve, go away completely, or mild to moderately improve. And so that should be the goal when you start looking at body fat, is to get these markers normal. Very, very simple, very, very easy. And fortunately, body mass index and waist-hip ratio correlate very nicely to these markers. In general, not always, in general, these markers correlate very, very nicely. So if you can get your waist-hip ratio and BMI normal and get your CRP normal, if you just did that, waist-hip ratio normal, BMI normal, CRP normal, hard to create these conditions in the absence of the inflammatory state of obesity and hyperglycemia. So easy to get, easy to fix. So make this whole fat shaming thing go away. If we could, it would be great because it's so stupid. And all it does is it serves to support the bloated pharmaceutical and surgical industrial complexes that most Americans deal with on a day in, day out basis. So if you like this approach, you can head over to Amazon and score individual copies of my books, which you can get through from my YouTube channel as well, where you can also get volume discounts for all of my books, and then link through if you can do it right now. Obviously, just like this channel. You can follow it on Facebook as well.